Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Ask a Property Manager. This is episode number 93 and today is October 20th, 2021. We're coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, Principal Broker of Own Buffalo Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about why it's important to check your smoke and CO detectors. We're taking a look at why home inspections are so important even on brand new construction. We're going to answer some questions from housing providers from around the country. Before we do all that, we're going to go ahead and plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager come out every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page. You can catch the replay that same day on our YouTube page as well. Don't forget about our Instagram. We post content there that doesn't make it to the other two platforms. And last but not least, don't forget about the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. New episode of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drops tomorrow. We're taking a look at what to do when a tenant will not comply with Section 8 repairs, screening and renting to international applicants, and the critical importance of properly screening your tenants. Don't miss out on this episode. It's a really, really good one. New episodes drop every other Thursday anywhere podcasts are heard or over at rentprep.com/podcast. We're going to jump into our news of the day here, starting with this article from the Buffalo News. Buffalo police lieutenant identified as landlord where 3 died in a house fire without smoke detectors. As law enforcement and fire officials continue a year-long investigation into a Buffalo house fire that killed a mother, father, and their baby, a relative says that the 3 would have been alive if the landlord, a Buffalo police lieutenant, had installed smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. My son told me that he asked the landlord several times for smoke and CO detectors, but he never responded to any of my son's calls. If he had gotten on it, my son and granddaughter and her mother would be here today, Ruth Gauchi said. Anthony Gauchi, 25, his girlfriend Emma Johnson, 28, and their 1-year-old daughter Amira Gauchi, 2 days shy of her 2nd birthday, died in the middle of the night 2-alarm fire at 57 East Utica Street on September 25th, 2020. His parents raised 2 concerns. What caused the fire and was it intentionally set? Law enforcement officials are still investigating the cause but said they have identified a person of interest. Should the landlord be cited for not having smoke and carbon monoxide detectors in the property? Fire officials said they are not focusing on that. Fire Commissioner Bill Ronaldo said that their initial investigation determined that there was no evidence of detectors at the apartment. The devices are required by state and local building codes. Ismail N. Lewis, who works as a police lieutenant in the Northwest District, has been identified by 3 law enforcement sources as the landlord of the building. Property and business records show that Priority One Realty owns the building and Lewis is the company's chairman. When contacted Wednesday, Lewis said he could not talk and promised to call the Buffalo News later, which he did not. Lewis did not respond to subsequent messages from the Buffalo News. 2 law enforcement sources, speaking on a condition of anonymity, said that no criminal charges were being considered against Lewis at this time. City code enforcement officials did not respond to calls or emails asking if they had taken action over the lack of detectors. Priority One Realty owns 5 properties in the city. According to a search of public records, an official at Buffalo Housing Court said there are no pending cases of building code violations against the other properties, including 57 East Utica, which has since been demolished. Person of interest. Law enforcement authorities said the investigation is going to continue to determine the investigation is continuing to determine what caused the fire, where it started, and if there was foul play. A car parked in the driveway close to the house was ablaze when firefighters arrived after 2:05 a.m. Law enforcement sources said they've identified a person of interest as they investigate if it was intentionally set. While confirming that there were no detectors in the house, Commander John Eaton, head of the fire department's fire marshal office, which investigates fires in the city, said the other aspects of the deadly blaze are currently under scrutiny. We have all the evidence and have forwarded it to the DA's office, are waiting on a go-ahead if it's a viable case, he said. Part of the investigation is to determine if it was accidental or if it was on purpose, Erie County DA John Flynn said. Ruth Gauchi and Michael Rodriguez, the father of Anthony, contacted the Buffalo News to express frustration that a cause for the fire, which they believe is suspicious, has not been determined, and because Lewis has not been cited for allegedly failing to install detectors. They also hope that by airing their concerns, someone might come forward with more information to push the slow-moving probe forward. Anthony Gauchi and Johnson rented the 2nd-floor apartment with a 3rd-floor bedroom. They all slept in the same bed. The 3 people were found in a rear 3rd-floor bedroom, which firefighters had difficulty reaching because a staircase had been compromised, Ronaldo said at the time of the fire. Anthony, who worked as a landscaper, struggled to provide for his family, Rodriguez wrote in a letter to the newspaper. Now it's as if it's being pushed aside. A landlord who owns multiple properties is not even mentioned as having any fault in their deaths. Tragedy had followed Anthony's family to East Utica Street. His mother said she explained that they had moved there following an electrical fire in an apartment building that they had previously lived in on Peterson Street in April of 2019. She says she hopes that the memory of her son, his girlfriend, and granddaughter can be preserved. I'd like to see a bench installed in the lot where the house stood, she said, of 57 East Utica Street. I'd like a little plaque on it that says, in loving memory of Anthony, Emma, and Amira, September 25th, 2020. Flynn and Eaton said they recognize the suffering the families endured in the past year, and they have not given up on the case. We are meeting continuously with Buffalo Fire and police officials on this case and will continue to do so. Eaton said, we are doing our due diligence. Have patience with us. It's one thing to arrest someone and another to convict. Investigations sometimes take a long time. When the investigation is successfully concluded, all aspects of the case will be addressed, Ronaldo said. So obviously this is a pretty sad story coming out of Buffalo here. I'm not going to sit here and throw mud on the property owner or anything like that, but what I do want to highlight is the fact that you need to check at least on a once-a-year basis as a housing provider to make sure that your property has working smoke and CO detectors in every apartment, in your basements, in your attics, everywhere that they're required by code. You got to stay on top of this thing. I understand that it's very easy to write into a lease that a tenant is responsible for taking care of those sorts of things. But we all know that the difference between a working smoke detector and a non-working smoke detector is a 9-volt battery or a couple of AA cell batteries. And if that's the difference between a family being safe and a family not being safe, realistically speaking, you need to be checking these things at least once a year. I know that we're actually in the process right now of doing our annual furnace servicing as we're starting to get into the cold weather months. Part of our annual furnace servicing is that our furnace contractor, our furnace vendor, checks all of the smoke and CO detectors in the bedrooms, in the common areas, and everything else, changes batteries as needed, installs units where they're missing, and makes sure that we're in compliance that way. It's one of the most critical things that you can do in terms of basic health and safety. To just make sure that there are working smoke and CO detectors inside of a unit. Also check your furnaces at least once a year, especially if you're in a cold weather climate like we are here in Buffalo. You need to be servicing furnaces at least once a year, changing those filters out, checking to make sure you don't have cracked heat exchangers, which can in turn pump carbon monoxide into an apartment. Again, it's a health and safety issue. Basic responsibility type things is what we're talking about here. We're going to go ahead and jump into a little bit more lighthearted story. Still kind of a crazy situation, but definitely a little bit more lighthearted than our last one. This one comes to us from KLTV out of East Texas, but the actual article itself is out of Mississippi here. Family's house sold for $236 after housing lot mix-up. A family said they received a notice that their home was sold for $236 in a delinquent tax sale, but the sale was done by mistake. Now they're hoping for a solution that will let them keep their Mississippi home along with their money after real estate agency Viking Investments purchased the property. As of right now, I do not own my home. Viking Investments does. Tiffany Ingram of Picayune, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, told WLOX, I own the lot next to the house and not the lot that the house was on. It seems the builder, Benchmark Home Builders, built the house on the wrong lot. Since the builder sold the house, the company stopped paying taxes. Ingram, however, was paying taxes on an imaginary house next door. Pearl River County tax assessor documents show that there were homes on both lots in the subdivision, even though one was clearly empty. They documented that there was a house on the vacant lot and a house, obviously, where my house is, instead of fixing it and saying that the house was in the wrong place, Ingram said. Meanwhile, the delinquent tax notices were not being delivered to anybody, and the county put the land up for sale. Ingram said that she found the note on her door from Viking Investments stating that the family had 3 days to vacate. To make matters worse, they had recently put the home up for sale, and the ownership dispute had led to several potential buyers backing out. Ingram said she isn't getting answers from the county, builder, or the investment company that now owns her house. WLOX spoke to the developer and the investor who bought the property. Both said they would find a way to resolve the problem without Ingram losing her house or any money. A Pearl River County official said that the tax sale would be voided, but transferring the land deeds would be more difficult. Nobody's called me to say, hey, Miss Ingram, this is what we're doing to fix this. We've got it handled. Don't freak out. Nobody's reached out to me, she said. The county tax assessor referred comments to the county attorney about how an empty lot was assessed as if there was a house on the lot. The county attorney did not return a comment did not return a request for comment. So that's a pretty substantial screw up. Essentially what happened here is it sounds like it was a new development that they were building houses as they were selling, and somehow, some way, some paperwork got screwed up, and the tax records for this woman were different than the actual physical location of the property. So it sounds like there were two adjoining lots. The builder built the property on, let's say, plot A, when it should have been built on plot B. The woman bought the property, assuming that everything was correct, and somebody somewhere along the lines must have figured that there was a property on both lot A and lot B, foreclosed at the county tax auction on the wrong lot because they thought that property, was being owned by someone, and it turns out it was just one giant, this sounds like one giant paperwork mess. So definitely scary. I mean, I wouldn't want it to happen to me. It's one of those things that it's going to take probably months to straighten it out, but hopefully eventually everybody does what they need to do to make right on the situation, and everybody can kind of move forward a little bit. We're going to move on to our humor value a little bit here. I wanted to share a TikTok here. This is not typically something that I would share, but I kind of scrolled past this one the other day. And this is a home inspector doing an inspection on a new build. I'm just going to play this. It's about 2 minutes long, but I want you to see the critical importance of home inspections, even on new build construction. There are so many things that can go wrong when you're building a new home, so many little things that can be missed, that it really is a good idea to have a home inspection, even on a new build construction. Let's go ahead and watch this real quick. I'll pipe in and comment from time to time as well.
If you get ready to drop $500,000 on a brand new house, you should probably get the outlets to not be loose. That's a beautiful transition that they did between the hardwood and tile. I would bet my next paycheck that this toilet's loose, and I would be right. That's a nice looking towel rack that they just decided to put a whole bunch of silicone caulk behind to try to get it to stick. Good looking shower stall, but I don't think I've ever seen that much caulk around a shower head. Yes, one of my personal favorites. Whenever they installed part of the tile surround, they didn't even bother to take off the plastic. Coming around to the exterior of the home, we can literally see behind the brick and see the Tyvek vapor barrier. We have a giant void all the way up where the stone veneer meets the brick. This is a good looking porch, if it wasn't warped. And when you run out of Tapcon screws, you can just use putty to attach a spigot to the exterior. Looks like the site superintendent just decided to allow the guys to throw their trash under the deck. You should also not use a wood pallet to support a water heater. The hose bib is not even attached to the house. It's completely loose. And we have a damaged window, and instead of actually just replacing the trim, they just use caulk. And I don't know if you can see it from here, but the hardwood and tile in this area are not perfectly flush. It's about a ½ inch above the hardwood, and on the sides and the corners, it's about a ¼ inch. Coming into the garage, as far as the handrail is concerned, it's entirely too loose. One of my favorite parts is that they installed the garage door, but they didn't even bother connecting the motor to the bracket on the door.
So that pretty much wraps up the video. I mean, you can just see, when you're dealing with a situation where you're, like this guy said, spending $500,000 on a brand new build house, you shouldn't be finding major issues like that. The worst, I think, was probably can I back up on this? This is crazy. Oh, there's so much room for water infiltrate and everything else to get back there. If this was a home in Buffalo and that was left as it is, within a year, you would have brick and stone falling off this house. I guarantee it, just due to the fact that water can get back there and penetrate and then freeze and thaw and cause so much damage. It's not a good situation to find yourself in, that's for sure. So, part humor value, part seriousness. When it comes to buying a home, always make sure a home inspection is on your list of things to do. I'm sure that those people are laughing all the way back to the renegotiation table. If you feel like following this guy on Instagram, he is inspector_AJ. He does have quite a bit of good content. It's interesting to see home inspectors getting out there and putting out some interesting stuff in their industry out there on a new platform. So very, very cool. Moving on, we do have one final thing to show you. I just had to show you guys this. I thought it was pretty funny. I don't know too many people who put their appliances together using that particular format to keep doors shut, but hey, you never know. If it gets the job done, it gets the job done, I guess. So we're going to go ahead and jump over to our question from housing providers around the country, starting with this one on re-verifying income for a lease renewal. Do you think it's necessary or unreasonable to request pay stubs for a renewal of a lease? Thanks in advance. So I think the real question here is, do you re-verify a tenant on lease renewal? And the answer to that question is no, we don't. If someone's paying their rent on time, we don't feel that we really have that much of a need to do a re-verification. And if they're not paying their rent on time, chances are they're not going to be extended a lease renewal anyway as part of our lease renewal process. So my recommendation here would be have a written policy on how you handle lease renewals. How many lease violations are okay to still extend a lease renewal? How many late payments is okay to still extend a lease renewal? Are you going to re-verify income on everybody who reapply or who you redo a lease on, who you offer a renewal to? Are you going to do a full application every year for every single person every time they renew their lease? You know, it could very well be overkill to sit and do a credit and background check every single year, but you might find out that someone who previously had a clean criminal background now has some sort of a criminal background that would prohibit them from living in the property. So maybe it's not so crazy from that aspect. But the one thing that you do need to keep in mind is that if you're going to have a policy like this, it needs to be written and the policy needs to be applied evenly across all tenants. So if you have a policy that says if you have more than 2 late payments in 12 months, we won't renew your lease, and then you extend a lease renewal to someone who had 4 late payments, you're no longer being consistent with your policy. So have a written policy and be consistent with how you apply that policy against every tenant that you have, and you should be in good shape. Moving on to our next question on broken appliances. Who is responsible? My tenants are reporting that a built-in microwave just stopped working. The lease states that tenants are responsible for any repairs due to neglect or carelessness of the tenant, and tenant agrees to pay for all costs of repairs made necessary by negligence or careless use. The problem is I don't know why it's not working. I probably have to suck this one up, but what should I do for future leases? So on this one, you have a microwave that's included as part of your tenancy. It's written into the lease by the sounds of things, the way that this question is asked. And generally speaking, that means that you as the housing provider are going to be responsible for its upkeep. The reality is, based on the information that we have here, we don't really know what the issue yet or who's responsible, whether it's going to be a tenant issue or whether it's going to be a property owner's concern. Either go take a look at it or send an appliance repair tech to take a look at it. And if they determine that it's old and it just plain broke, well, that's on you as the housing provider. Sometimes appliances break. If they determine that the tenant was using the appliance negligently and that's what caused the appliance to break, at that point the tenant owes for that repair. And I think that makes pretty common sense. Appliances break all the time. We don't know how old this microwave is. We don't know the manufacturer. We don't know how well anyone else has cared for the appliance the entire time that it's been in place. All we know is at this point that the appliance is not working. But I think that most people can agree here that most older appliances seem to last a little bit longer than some of the newer stuff. So you may have a microwave that, yeah, it might only be 2 years old, but it may have already died simply because they're not built the way that they used to be. It's unfortunate. I wish that appliances were built to last, but at that point, the appliance companies wouldn't get your money for selling you new appliances every 3 to 5 years. So, it could just be a situation where the thing naturally expired. It just, end of life, it does happen. But either way, your first step is going to be to determine how it broke and get it fixed before you can determine who's actually responsible for the cost of that repair. Realistically, on a microwave, you're probably going to be better off just replacing it if it's a countertop model, one that just sits on the countertop, rather than spend the money to send an appliance technician out. Just replace it. It's what, $100 for a countertop unit? They're not all that expensive. If it's an over-the-range style one with a vent hood, yeah, those are a little bit more expensive. You're probably going to have someone come out and install that unless you're particularly handy and want to drop the old one and put the new one in. So yeah, you might have a little bit more expense there, but again, those microwaves are basically the same quality as the countertop units. And when they die, they die. So it may be something that's not even going to wind up being serviceable, or it may not make sense to service it if it's an older unit or something like that. So just a few things to keep in mind there. My recommendation would be just replace the thing and move on, and then make a determination as to who's responsible based on what you see when you look at the old one. On to our third and final question. Investor's choice, 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms. When purchasing an apartment building, do you mostly prefer 1 bed, 1 bath, or do you prefer larger units, 2 beds, 3 beds, whatever, and why? My personal preference on this is 2 or more bedroom units. I think that studio and 1-bedroom apartments have a tendency to turn over a lot more, which leads to more expense in the turnovers, more time spent screening new tenants, more management at that property, just a bad situation. So, typically speaking, you're going to find that rents are also going to be a little bit higher on 2, 3, 4 bedrooms than they are on a 1-bedroom unit, which is another reason that I like to see the bigger bedroom counts, because it does generate a higher rent. I found over the years that 2+ bedroom apartments have a tendency to be a little bit more stable. They don't turn over quite as frequently. So that would be my preference just from a management perspective. This one's kind of a preference-based question based on someone's investment profile, their risk profile. If you have somebody that is more involved in the hands-on day-to-day, they may not mind studios or 1-bedrooms where they're going to be involved on a regular basis. If it's something that's meant to be more passive, you might be looking for a larger number of bedrooms, because those tenants might stay longer, and that might make it a little bit more passive investment than what you were thinking about. So regardless of all that, you need to understand whether or not it's a good deal. Does the deal stand on its own merits, regardless of how many bedrooms and bathrooms and everything else there are? And a good way to determine that is to go over to what'sdrewupto.com, grab a copy of our free deal analyzer. It doesn't get much easier than that spreadsheet, and I even include a video along with it to show you how to use it. So if you're not sure if something is actually a good deal or not, run the numbers before you make your offer, understand what you're buying into before you put yourself in a situation where you're going to be underwater on a bad buy. That pretty much wraps things up for this week's episode of Ask a Property Manager. Thank you all so much for watching. We truly do appreciate it. We love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can always help us to improve by dropping a question in the comments either on Facebook or on YouTube, and your question may be picked up and answered in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content, or if we brought some value to you today, do us a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us to grow and reach more people. We'll be back next week on Wednesday, October 27th at 10 a.m. Eastern with another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.